drinking, as we know, is a depressant and a relaxant. And if I drink regularly over time, my body compensates, anticipates that is going to be coming by ratcheting up my anxiety, my irritability, my restlessness, so that when I drink, as expected, my heart doesn't slow down so much that it forgets to start beating, keep beating, right? And so in this very weird way, the truth of the matter is that drinking repeatedly causes anxiety. And the more anxious you get, the more you need a drink to take the edge off.
Welcome to the New World Normal podcast. I'm Debbie Harrell, your host, and twice a month I'm speaking with some amazing humans who are disrupting norms and working to create a more inclusive and holistic society. These people are using their sphere of influence, no matter how large or small, to positively impact the world around them. They'll be sharing their expertise as well as sharing stories of resiliency and hope. We'll be talking about the issues that are affecting us all, from the environment, human rights, social issues, criminal justice, and education. We'll talk about our healthcare systems, wellness, and food, from how it's cultivated and distributed to how it's prepared and consumed. Basically, we're going to talk about all the systems in our society that aren't necessarily working for the benefit of the many. We'll strategize and collaborate on how we as a collective can intentionally make better choices every day that will lead to a positive change in the world around us. Because in the end, it's up to us to solve these problems. There is no magic potion or magic wand. It is us and our daily choices and how we spend our time and how we invest our resources. Intrigued? Stick around and have a listen, and by all means, click like or subscribe on your favorite podcast source. Hello, welcome back to the New World Normal podcast. I'm Debbie Harrell. Today, we're having an interesting conversation about alcohol. Have you ever wondered if your drinking is a problem? Maybe you drink too much. Maybe you're a binge drinker. Maybe you don't feel like you fit into the classic definition of an alcoholic, but you've still wondered if maybe your life could be different if you used alcohol differently or not at all. These are the things we're talking about on the conversation today with Allison, who is a successful entrepreneur, an author, and a community builder who has been alcohol-free since 1999. She's working with women and helping them transform their lives by stopping the drinking spiral and creating a rich and rewarding, joyful future. This isn't necessarily a story about the lows of a rock bottom, but more the highs of an elevated, alcohol-free existence. I really hope you enjoy the conversation, and I would love to hear your thoughts at the end. Today, we are talking with Allison, who is the founder of Juicy AF, but in this case, AF doesn't stand what you think it stands for. It stands for alcohol-free. And so today we are going to disrupt norms surrounding the way we view and use alcohol in our society. One thing I want to make clear from the get-go is this is not about judging the way anybody uses alcohol. I know it's very common, very socially acceptable. This is more about turning off the autopilot and getting more intentional and questioning like why and how. I know I work with my clients about aligning their day-to-day habits with their overall long-term goals, and how is the way you're using alcohol serving that? Knowing that from time to time that it's about balance too, right? Having cutting loose and having fun is going to serve your goals also. But overall, as a big picture item, how is that influencing? So I'm really excited to talk to our guest today about how her examining the way she used alcohol and made the changes she decided to make that worked for her life has impacted her life overall. So how's that for a jumping off point?
That's a fabulous jumping off point. One of the hallmarks of a person who drinks excessively is denial. And it seems very weird to describe this to you now, but I've seen this with so many women that are caught in that drinking spiral. We're in this drinking spiral and we're not feeling good and our lives aren't moving in the right way. And yet a life without alcohol seems horrible, and it's nothing that we want any part of. I think what I really, really wanted was to be able to drink the way I wanted to drink and not have any consequences. The problem is that's not a thing. You
Right?
kind of
That's
can't have both.
Yes, consequences come with just about everything we choose to do in this world, and so alcohol wouldn't be any different.
Right. I mean, both positive and negative, right? I mean, it's all cause and effect on some level. And I thought at the beginning that I was drunk was my get out of jail free card, and that what I did when I was drinking didn't count in some way. And the realization that it really did count, and that there was this chasm between the woman I thought of myself as being and the way I was behaving. That's what got me to wake up.
I was going to ask, does your story involve the classic, quote unquote, like rock bottom story, or was it more of like, I just don't feel like I'm being the best version of myself that I can be, and what happens if I stop doing this part of it?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
So I had gone skipping merrily over all kinds of moral boundaries that I set for myself. I was like waving at them as I passed over them. Being a mom is central to who I am, and being a good mom is very important to me. What really prompted me to stop was my children, who were then 9 and 16, my older children, on an evening where I had said, I'm not going to drink. I had one glass of champagne at 10:30 at a party, and my kids had to undress me and put me to bed. And I was done. I have no other explanation for it, but I woke up with the hangover and the remorse and the shame. But I also woke up with some clarity that this was intolerable. This gap between how I saw myself as being a mom and what I was actually doing and the kind of mom I really was, that those were two very separate things and diametrically opposed. And that was intolerable.
That makes a sense. I like the way you said that you woke up with the hangover, but also the clarity. And then, so how did you go about it? Because so many people that, decide they want to quit or even think about quitting have a hard time doing it. What was that part like for you?
Well, I have an older sister who had gone to 12-step program. And so I figured that's what you did.
Hmm.
I had no idea. It was 1999. I've been sober for a long time. And rehab and detox and treatment centers, like that wasn't part of my world. I had no idea that that stuff even existed. And so I went to a 12-step program and was willing to do whatever they said because of how painful my reality was. What I have found is doing 12-step programs as a woman is similar to Ginger Rogers with Fred Astaire. You're kind of doing it backwards and in heels. It requires a certain amount of translation in order for their suggestions to land and really make a difference, which is why I started Juicy AF.
Okay. That's an interesting nuance that I would have never thought. I'm not super familiar. I'm familiar with the concept of 12 steps, but I haven't ever been to any meetings per se, but that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that it would be just like everything else, how they do the medical research for male bodies and like interesting nuances. So what is Juicy AF all about? What is your mission there?
My mission with Juicy AF is to help women whose light is dimmed by alcohol or other substances, and to help them transform from that dimmer place into a vibrant, interesting, juicy, alcohol-free life.
I have to say, I love the name. I get drawn to names.
Thank you.
What type of people do you feel you're attracting? because where I'm trying to navigate or feel like there might be an emergence in doing research for trying to find someone to come on and talk about alcohol on the show is there are people that hit the, rock bottom. And then there's other people that just kind of decide, like it's not really working for me anymore. And I'm curious if that maybe it's just my time in life where I feel like that's more common, or maybe it's the overall time in history that we are, and we're being, because of this global pandemic we went through, where people might be being more health conscious. And, there's the health side of it too, of when you're drinking alcohol, what are you doing? You're really kind of poisoning yourself a little bit. And
Yes, you are poisoning yourself. I mean, it is. There's a podcast called Huberman Labs, and Andrew Huberman did a 2-hour long podcast on the biology of alcohol. But I'm not, fine, you want to have a drink. It doesn't make any difference to me. But the people that I serve are people that looked like I did, right? So I was a senior vice president of a global ad agency. I drove a shiny new German car. I had custody of 2 really wonderful kids. And I was drinking a bottle of wine 4 nights a week. And on a bad night, I was opening a second bottle. And I'm not going to say how far into it I got, but it was far. And I think that there are a lot of successful women that are driven by this fear that we are somehow inadequate, not enough, or it's twin sister way too much. And so we're driven to achieve. We have a lot of ambition. We have a lot of personal agency. But all that stuff is actually a liability when it comes to stopping drinking. To your point about, is it a moment in my life or is it a moment culturally? There's been this huge movement towards sober curious, hashtag sober curious. And because of that, there is a burgeoning of non-alcoholic beverage options. If you go to a restaurant now, there's a mocktail part of the menu. The non-alcoholic beverage space in the food and beverage industry is closing in on $1 billion in annual revenue compared to the $23 billion for booze. But still, it's much more than it was. I mean, when I got sober, you had sparkling water or you had wine. I mean, those were kind of your 2 options.
yeah, I find it interesting. I know for myself, it was a slower progression of my son was diagnosed with a medical condition that as he grew up, if he decided to drink, it would be really dangerous for him. And at that time, he was only 14, 15 at the time. So he wasn't drinking, but I started to reflect on, well, what am I modeling and how am I using alcohol? So I started thinking about it then, but continued on I was more of a social weekend warrior drinking. And I had the excuse, or I gave myself the excuse that I usually did it when my kids were with their other parent. Right. So, but it was still affecting me in my day-to-day life, the way, the days missed because you're hungover and tired. But then moving forward, my cousin, who was my closest family member at the time, started struggling with alcoholism, and trying to get him the help that he needed, and him eventually succumbing to the disease was very much you know, wake up moment. Like, okay, what is this? But still I carried on, like this is fun. This is how I relax and have a good time with my friends and cut loose. But the reality is my body was warning me all along, this is not working for you. This is not working for you. It was getting more and more to the point where I would have like one drink and feel like crap for 2 days after. And then I end up diagnosed with an autoimmune issue. All the while, my body was like having trouble detoxing from that drinking. Now, whether that was the cause and effect of my autoimmune, likely not, but it was definitely a contributing factor. But it took all those things happening. And still, I was like, but I want to drink. It's fun. Also realizing I was doing a bit of self-medicating for what I now know as social anxiety, right? So it's been a process and very interesting along the way, paying attention to the people around me, how they react to you differently. What do you mean you're not having a drink? Well, I'm not having a drink. I order the first sparkling water, and then another round gets ordered, and they look at you, "What are you gonna have?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm still good." Like and it's interesting how societally, how culturally, when you're out with your friends, things you're treated differently. And how much of that needs to shift? Like, do I need to find new friends? I don't think so. Like, I feel like we're all still functioning with each other. But I can see that being a hurdle for people who are going from maybe more of a drinking quote unquote problem to complete sobriety and having to cut that whole section out of their life. And I also feel like that would be an important place for your community to step in and fill some gaps. Do you feel like that's part of?
Oh, it's definitely part. I mean, there's research that shows that one of the most powerful elements in 12-step programs is the community and are the connections. The other piece is the spirituality piece. And both of those things have been pivotal in transforming my life. So, yes, those two elements are absolutely part of Juicy AF. And I have a book coming out in January, and one of the chapters is about how to handle 7 sticky situations. That social norm of, hey, let's get together for a drink, or can I get you a drink, or why aren't you drinking? I mean, those crazy things. You're going to have sex with somebody for the first time and you're stone cold
Totally sober.
sober. I mean, it's a little freaky.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up because I remember examining that, just thinking about even relationships or new relationships. Like, how many times did I actually have sex with that person sober? Like, not many. Which that's
Yes,
a whole nother story, which is
it is.
just bizarre to think that that was quote unquote normal. And the 7 sticky situations. I love that you said that. But talking about like trying to connect with people, we've been this portion of our life where we've been at home a lot. And now that we're venturing out and wanting to connect with people face to face again, like, oh, hey, we should go to happy hour. And I'm like, well, I guess I could still go to happy hour. Like, that's something to say because I'm not a morning person. So I'm certainly not going to meet you for coffee because I also don't drink coffee in the afternoon. So I'm like, it just feels more natural to say, hey, let's meet for happy hour. I'll eat. You can buy the drinks.
That sounds like a plan. I want to come back to something that you said a little while ago, which is using a drink as a way to take the edge off of social anxiety. And I want to talk about that in 2 ways. The first is alcohol really does not relieve anxiety, it actually causes anxiety. There's this magical thing our bodies do called homeostasis, right? It's what our body does without us controlling it to keep us in the survival mode. Like we shiver when we're cold and we sweat when we're hot. We're all familiar with that. What we're less familiar with as a culture is that repeatedly taking in substances to your body changes your body's baseline. So, for instance, you don't drink coffee. You probably wake up a lot more alert than I do because I love coffee, right? So, over time, my coffee drinking has actually caused my body to become groggier when I wake up so I don't get so jittery that I bounce out of my skin and my heart explodes. The opposite phenomena happens with drinking. Where drinking, as we know, is a depressant and a relaxant. And if I drink regularly over time, my body compensates, anticipates that is going to be coming by ratcheting up my anxiety, my irritability, my restlessness, so that when I drink, as expected, my heart doesn't slow down so much that it forgets to keep beating, right? And so, in this very weird way, the truth of the matter is that drinking repeatedly causes anxiety. And the more anxious you get, the more you need a drink to take the edge off. And therein you are in the spiral that it's really perplexingly hard to get out of.
I love that you explained it that way because I've seen it in practice, like friends that I know who have drinking problems and also have severe anxiety problems. So I've seen it happening, but I never really understood or really stopped to think about the biology behind it. So I appreciate you explaining that. And it makes a heck of a lot of sense.
And when you first stop drinking, that anxiety feels nauseating. And the only thing I can say is it settles down. It doesn't settle down like it does when you have the sip of the first drink, when you kind of have to ride that wave and get over the crest of it. But eventually you end in a place that is far less baseline anxious.
If you're enjoying this conversation, you'll love the discussions happening in the New World Normal community, where we meet regularly to discuss personal growth and social issues, because we know when we do our work, we're better able to navigate this ever-changing world. Be sure to follow the link in the show notes for more information. Well, and I feel like with anything, it's the practice of learning the new habits of how to manage that anxiety. Because I know that's been a lot of my work over the last couple years is figuring out how to work with my nervous system, right? And developing my own way to keep that homeostasis as far as that doesn't involve alcohol.
Right.
Even though it wasn't the alcohol that prompted me to pay better attention to that, it was the fact that I'm like suffering with anxiety, depression, and this roller coaster that I'm tired of being on. And what is that? What does all that mean? And how do I deal with it? So it just throwing the alcohol in it really is mind boggling that it took me as long as it did to figure out like, hey, I don't think this is really helping.
Well, I mean, that's what Einstein said the definition of insanity was, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. For me, it's nut butter these days. I love nut butter. Nut butter does not work for me no matter how many times I think, oh, maybe this time it'll be different. It's never different. I'm going to tell you right now, not going to be different.
It's interesting. And to talk about the physical issues that you have, like you're talking about the nut butter not working with you, and having friends and people I know in my life that are experiencing all these strange medical issues. And what's the first thing the doctor says? Like, oh, maybe you should cut out the drinking and the whatever. And it like, why would I do that? Well, it might be contributing. And and I mean, it makes perfect sense. And I am right there with them when I'm first hearing, oh, the doctor says I should quit drinking, but I'm not going to do that. I'm like, why was that okay to be like, yeah, I'm just not going to listen to the doctor's advice on that.
I know better, surely.
Yeah,
My
like,
degree in music qualifies me to know medically what's going on. No, it really doesn't.
fascinating. And I think it's part of because it's so ingrained in our society and our culture. Like drinking is so much a part of it.
It makes me wonder, actually, if in, 20 years, 50 years, we're going to look back at this period and the preceding period, the way we now look at the cigarette smoking era and think, what were we thinking?
Well, that's what I keep coming back to the like, because I feel like I'm the type of person, I know plenty of people like, I can't drink at all because if I have one, I'm going to have the entire bottle and that's it. I really feel like I could just have one drink and be done. But then my point is, but why? Like, why? There's really no reason to, right? And I even said it when I was drinking, like I drink for results. Like if I'm drinking to get a little buzz on to feel that, right? So why am I just going to have one drink? Like, I don't know.
There's no point.
No.
I mean, in my book, there's absolutely no point. If you're not going to get buzzed, if you're not going to, feel that great weightless feeling of being free, why would you do it?
So how do you find that great feeling without the alcohol? I bet you have plans for that.
Well, I realized that there's a spiritual solution to everything. And it prompted me to embark on this journey of trying to discern if there are laws that govern the world spiritually in the same way there are physical laws that govern the way the material world works. So we can't see gravity, but we sure know that it works, right? And so that's really where it prompted me, because I have felt since the time I was a kid, very clearly, I had this visceral sense of being a channel of light and love and energy. I felt it when I sang, I felt it when I was in the mountains. And I think I've always been hearkening back to try to get there.
It's so weird. I have to stop you for a second because as you're saying this, there's the light above your head that I'm sure was there all along, but I didn't notice it. But as you were talking about it, the light was just getting brighter and like right through your face. Anyways, if anybody ever gets to see this on video, who knows? I might do that someday. But carry on. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
And what I have found is that my drinking and the things underneath my drinking are blocks to that flow of energy and love, because drinking was my solution. Drinking wasn't my problem. Drinking was my solution for social anxiety, for all these old stories that I told myself about my place in the world and my identity. Drinking solved all of that. It was freeing and colorful and magical, and the world was full of possibilities. I didn't know where I was going to end up, which was super attractive to me. And the key is that by using these 5 spiritual laws, I have been able to create a reality that's colorful and magical and full of possibilities. And I've been able to lose those old stories that used to run me.
Sounds amazing.
It is amazing. Come on in. It's so much fun.
So what are the principles that you use?
So the 5 spiritual laws that I use, the first one is that our subconscious creates our reality. I mean, if you think about like what's around you right now, you've created it. You may not have actually made the glasses you're wearing, but you chose them based on perceptions and what fit and your ambitions. So everything around us we have created, usually pretty subconsciously or unconsciously. The opportunity is to be able to take that and say, ooh, consciously, what's my ideal future self? Because recent psychological research shows that our future self, our sense of ourselves in the future, is actually more powerful than anything that happened to us in the past. And if you're being run by your past, it means your vision of yourself in the future isn't compelling enough. So that's spiritual law number 1.
Perpetuating the past by projecting it into the future.
Oh, yeah, that's a great way to think about it. Right on.
I happen to be reading Joe Dispenza right now. So.
Oh, I love Joe Dispenza. Yeah, yeah. The second is the law of substitution. You know that diet, eat this, not that?
Okay.
It also works in the spiritual world. I loved what you were saying early about you have your clients think about, are their daily habits matching who they want to be, right? And so this substitution is a very action oriented one. Instead of reaching for the wine, you know what? Masturbate, have an orgasm. You'll get that relief and you don't have to pick up a drink, right? So,
and I feel like that works for a lot.
It works for everything, really.
You might have to pick the time and place.
Well, true enough. But the same thing's true for old stories, right? Those ideas that we make up when we're little people that stop serving us as grown people. Mine was, I'm not good enough. I'm not thin enough, sophisticated enough, smart enough, successful enough, thin enough, like fill in the blank enough. And man, did that run me. It propelled me into a lot of success and a lot of achievement, which I'm very grateful for. But at this point in my life, I do not want to be run by that story anymore. So I need to find a spiritual principle like honesty or compassion or generosity or forgiveness as an antidote to that old story that was poisoning my world. Because if I can't do that, I'm going to need a drink.
Makes a lot of sense.
The third one is like, I just don't believe that manifesting stuff. You have to take action. And actions into a new life start in your old life and they feel wrong. They feel uncomfortable. They feel like just simply wrong at some level. You don't want to do them. But in order to change your feeling state, you have to take different actions. So the law is actions first, feelings follow. Okay.
Okay.
The fourth one is forgiveness frees you. That
So true.
forgiveness isn't about condoning what the other person did. It's not about inviting them over for dinner and becoming best friends. It's about disentangling those threads that bind us to that person if we don't forgive them. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be bound to my former partner, and I don't want to be bound to the people that hurt me. I want to have enough seniority over my own internal experience that they're not controlling me. And so it's kind of a selfish act, but I forgive people because I don't want to be bound up with them anymore. So forgiveness brings freedom is number 4. And the fifth one is in order to receive love, you have to be love. And it's about connection, service, and actually showing up and asking for things and offering into a community of people.
I love that. It's being love and not, because I know a lot of times people get hung up on the well, you can't love somebody else until you love yourself. Well, I don't love myself every day. Like I go through all the roller coasters of feelings, but I can still be love in that time when I'm maybe not feeling great about myself. So I like that differentiation. Couple other things I'd love to touch on that you said. Manifestation. That has been a huge one for me because I was always like, manifestation, what are you talking about? This never works. Although I would see it working for people. I'm like, I'm sorry. I think about stuff all the time and nothing ever shows up on my front porch. I think y'all are crazy. But when you mentioned action, what I found to be true for me is it was about alignment, but also about action. When I became aligned to who I am, my core values, and I started taking action on those values, things started to present themselves. So in that case, I guess it was kind of because people are like, "You manifested that." I'm like, "Did I? I don't know. I don't know if it's alignment, manifestation, if it's just terminology, but I feel like when you are aligned and you are living your life's truth and you're taking action on it, that the universe kind of presents stuff and a path. And the fact that you mentioned forgiveness, that is huge. And you see so many people get wrapped up right before you. I had an interview with a woman who works with blended families, and you see that so much in that dynamic of exes and holding on to that hurt and anger, and who ends up caught in the middle, but the kids. But it's so common to see it happening. And if people just get that clue, like, hey, forgiveness is freeing for you. Think of it as selfishly if you can't think of it as a generous thing to do, because everyone's going to benefit if you can just get there.
It's very true. I mean, when I first stopped drinking, I was all entangled with my ex-husband, just emotionally. And going through this process where I saw how I had contributed, my old story, right, was I'm a victim of him. And then I really started exploring that. Is that actually true? Is that really honest? No. I was complicit. I encouraged a guy that was 19 years older than I when I was 18 and met him. I mean, I was complicit in this. And when I got to the point where I could forgive him and I could forgive my 18-year-old self, oh, I'm so neutral about him. I mean, our son just got married a few months ago, and my husband and I hosted the rehearsal dinner, and I was neutral. I was kind, I was friendly, and I was neutral, which, gosh, what a gift.
For you and for your son, because if you couldn't have gotten to that point, what what a stressful situation that would be for everybody.
Right. It's true. It is a gift. I think my ex-husband, I think his tombstone is going to read, "He's still pissed," but that's his choice, not mine.
Right. We can't get other people to forgive, but choosing to do so for ourselves is going to help the situation. Either way, like you were able to do that even though it was just one-sided, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Still probably made the evening much more pleasant for everybody involved.
It's made my life, my internal life, so much better. And I really think that cleaning that up with my ex before I married the love of my life helped this marriage be clean, just completely clean. I wasn't dragging all that garbage in here with me.
That's a good point. So the love of your life, how did that happen?
We met at a sober party.
Oh, those are things. The sober
Yeah,
party.
there was a sober party and he was there, and he's younger than I am. I went from one extreme to not quite as an extreme, but in the other direction. So on average, I figure I'm kind of good.
Okay, there you go. You just average it out.
Yeah.
I love that. A happy ending. Well, I feel like
May I just say one thing about that?
yes, please.
I had to let go of those old stories, or I never would have been attracted to my husband. And I certainly would not have been attractive to my husband. And I really became the woman that I wanted to be. Remember, I said when I drank, I thought my life would be magical and colorful, and I felt free of all that stuff, all my internal stuff. And I had to figure out how to get free. And it was this substitution of honesty and kindness and like all the Boy Scout, Girl Scout kind of virtues. But that is the fulcrum on which the transformation in my world has really rested. And so when I met John, I really was able to be matter of factly honest about how scared I was, how uncomfortable I felt, like we'd laugh about how anxious we both were. And oh my gosh, talk about another way to get free is just to say, man, I feel so awkward right now. It's just incredibly uncomfortable. And we both would laugh. Oh, that's so funny.
Well,
But it
it's
helped.
freeing and it's bonding because the reality is we're all feeling awkward at certain times and that freedom to be able to admit like, oh, this is really strange and uncomfortable and I feel silly or whatever, naming it however you feel. I love that freedom to do that. And I love that you found a place because it gives me hope that I'm not currently dating right now. I hope to someday, but to know there's different ways to navigate this with more openness and vulnerability. And maybe that was the problem all along for all my other relationships.
The other thing that's just magical is when something goes awry, which it does a lot, each one of us looks at ourselves first. Like, what? That's crazy talk.
That's huge. And that is a commercial for doing the work in itself, right? Like, because that's part of what I think about. Part of the reason I'm not dating is because I feel like I'm still in process. I'm working on some stuff and I want to have a much clearer picture of where I stop, the next person begins before I get into anything. But it's so common to when something goes wrong to try and blame the other person immediately. So I love that the inverse is also true. And I love what you said about the old stories because they do drive so many of us and perpetuating that I feel like it's just sabotaging your future self. Like you were saying, it all plays such a big part.
It does. It does. If nothing changes, nothing changes.
And the acceptance of, oh yeah, I am working through my old stories right now. Like that's coming up right now isn't about me or what's happening right now. This is an old story and I'll get through it in a minute, like, or whatever, in a month, in a whatever. But being able to name them like that, I feel like is another point in time that we are in where I was, you'll be able to help me because I tried to say this to the last person. She's like, I have no idea. The wine steward, the wine expert, sommelier. Is that how you say it? Yes.
Yep.
becoming the sommelier of your neuroses. Like, I am in touch. I know my shit. I know where I go a little bonkers, and I also know where I'm a little more solid and grounded. So I love that freedom and being able to have the vocabulary to talk about that kind of stuff. One of the other things we talk about on New World Normal, more in my community, because I have a community as well, we talk about personal growth at the intersection of social issues. How do we take care of ourselves so we can show up as our best versions and be functioning and contributing members of society? And I have a feeling that you are going to have a good answer to this, but what are some ways that you take care of yourself so that you can show up as the best version of you in your day-to-day life?
I believe that how I start my day determines my day. And so I'm very rigorous and committed to the way that I start my day. So I don't even stand up when I get out of bed. I slide out of bed onto my knees and I ask the universe, source, whatever your name for it is, to direct my day and to use me as a service of love. And then, you got to have your coffee. I know you don't identify with that, but I do. I really am sensitive to the amount of light. So I have seasonal affective disorder. So I sit in front of my light box from Labor Day to Memorial Day. I mean, not the whole time, but in the morning for a minute or 20. So I do that. I read a spiritual book. I take notes on it. I've been experimenting with EFT, emotional freedom techniques. So I do a tapping thing. I've been doing some self-hypnosis and I meditate. So basically I could spend 8 hours just trying to get set for my day, but really the whole thing only takes me maybe half an hour, but it's just essential to my having a sense of liking myself and being happy with myself.
I love it. And I love that you said first that you start on your knees and you refer to it as source or the universe or whatever you're comfortable with, because so many people get turned off by that spiritual, if you're going to call it God, and the identification of the Christian God versus the whatever other God. And I'm like, why are we so hung up on that? Like, there's so many ways to refer to it. If you're uncomfortable with God, like I tend to go with universe, but I like source. There's like so many different ways, but to be able to recognize that there's bigger things than ourselves at play here, and to be of service is such a big part of, I think, who we were all meant to be. And I think remembering that and getting more in touch with that is a beautiful way to start the day. I too have gotten much more committed and connected with my morning routine. And I do drink coffee in the morning. I just don't drink it in the afternoon because I love my sleep too much. I don't want to mess with it. So I love, and I'm actually taking a tapping class right now. I find it fascinating.
It's fantastic. The way it makes me feel afterwards, I can feel the tingle and I like the way it feels. One thing that I do want to say is, I've been a practitioner of meditation since the early 90s, even before I got sober. And here's what I've learned. It's more important to do 30 seconds of meditation 7 days a week than it is to do an hour and a half of meditation once every blue moon. And so the practice of, laughably small increment, 30 seconds, can you count your breaths up to 3, is inviting and funny enough that why wouldn't you do it every day? It doesn't flood me with fear of, oh my God, 20 minutes, what in the heck is going to go on? So I would just invite your listeners to experiment for 30 days with counting your breaths for 30 seconds every day.
I love that you said that, because so many people use it as an excuse. Well, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. We really only need a few seconds, and you can do it anytime during the day, right? Taking a few moments to be with your breath and to be in the moment is a complete game changer for any time. Like, I know even before I And part of the reason I'm probably a little scattered in this interview is because I didn't do it before this call because my dogs were having a moment downstairs. So I didn't have my few minutes before the call to sit and get focused and get grounded. So it does work. It's a little commercial for it working. Tell us again, you have a book coming out. Where can people connect with you? Do you hang out on the socials or?
Absolutely. On Instagram, it's juicy. No, it's not. It's at join_juicy AF. On TikTok, it's juicy AF. And my website that has a couple really cool freebies, like a quiz where you can figure out whether or not your drinking really is a problem or not, and a downloadable PDF of the 5 spiritual laws. That's juicyaf.life.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time. All those links will be in the show notes for anybody that didn't catch that. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and I appreciate what you're doing in the world. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate your time. I hope you got something out of this conversation. I feel like Kay's advice with the 5 rules, I also love that she gave us 5 rules. Hello, bullet points. Can be helpful regardless of whether you are deciding to live an alcohol-free life or not. I feel like they're pretty universal, and I feel like some of the topics discussed will be helpful regardless of your relationship with alcohol. Thanks again for tuning in. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our show. If you enjoyed what you heard, feel free to subscribe and leave us a review. If you didn't enjoy what you heard, reach out to us and let us know how we can make it better. This show really is about all of us, not just me and my guests, but how we can all work together to make the world just a little bit better. And if you'd like to connect with us in other ways, be sure to follow us on Instagram. We also have a free Facebook group where our fans of the show can connect and discuss their favorite episodes. And in addition to that, we have a membership platform, The Collective by New World Normal, where you will participate in monthly workshops, pop-up challenges, and weekly meetings to support a more intentional lifestyle. We have meaningful conversations about important topics, all in a space that is safe, supportive, and encouraging. So join us. And if you'd like to show us some more support, check out our intentional apparel shop online, New World Intentions. You'll find t-shirts, hats, totes, all with positive messaging to help you move more mindfully through your day and help you to create that new world normal. You can also check out our affiliate page where you'll find our favorite eco-friendly household and personal care products. Thanks again for listening.